All right, welcome everyone from all over the world to the panel discussion, which will be building the future of rural sub-Saharan Africa through e-mobility together. This is a great topic, and for the agenda, I'll just run down how we're going to carry this on. We will have a presentation from the Toyota Mobility Foundation, a 5-minute presentation on their approach to sub-Saharan Africa, and then we'll have 3 videos of the work that Toyota Mobility Foundation has done in sub-Saharan Africa, and then we will deep dive into the panel discussions. Please enjoy.
Building the future of rural sub-Saharan African e-mobility together. Presentation and interactive panel by the Toyota Mobility Foundation and the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, complimentary off-site event. The Toyota Mobility Foundation, TMF, was established in August 2014 to help create a better, more mobile society. Through mobility, TMF works to create sustainable communities where all people can fulfill their potential and live vibrantly. TMF's mission is to build an enjoyable mobile society by leveraging its expertise, partnering with allies, and harnessing its power to pursue innovation, thereby enabling all people to access anywhere. The Toyota Mobility Foundation has worked with its local and international partners to implement projects and interventions around the world. To balance the efforts of other donors on urban Africa, shown on the left, the Toyota Mobility Foundation has decided to tackle the issues facing rural areas on the right. With 90% of the farmers in sub-Saharan Africa being small-scale farmers, mobility is overwhelmingly lacking in these areas to support daily activities and foster development. The Toyota Mobility Foundation collaborates with organizations with expertise across various fields. These collaborations are essential to ensuring the efficacy of its project's activities and the sustainability of the community outcomes. In this way, the Toyota Mobility Foundation aims to cooperate with other aligned and impactful public and private sector organizations so that its projects serve as models that may further be developed as well as redeployed around the world. The Toyota Mobility Foundation supports mobility's role in contributing to the improvement of the everyday lives of rural women and mothers. The Toyota Mobility Foundation leverages mobility to support access to rural medical services. For rural farmers who struggle with first-mile and last-mile access to markets and inputs, increased mobility multiplies their revenues. It enables access to markets for their products such as fresh milk, bananas, eggs, and horticulture. To support rural communities and their livelihoods, the Toyota Mobility Foundation has developed a holistic operational and economical model, as well as a deployment platform. Additionally, TMF has provided its local implementation partners hands-on support and seed financing. In partnership with local stakeholders, TMF works to establish local implementation team and partners, establishes the facilities and hardware to support the deployment of rural e-mobility, leverages and develops software applications to ensure operational efficiency, designs interventions to deliver daily life support together with economic activities which ensure the financial sustainability of the model. The Toyota Mobility Foundation's model is designed to be iteratively and continuously improved to develop lasting impact to the daily lives of smallholder farmers. In doing so, the Toyota Mobility Foundation applies Toyota's execution model of continuous improvement, Kaizen and PDCA, plan, do, check, act. TMF is currently partnering with a number of innovative African startups, Mobility for Africa in Zimbabwe, Aceleron in Kenya, and Bodawork in Uganda. As for local staff, TMF recruits primarily from the local community to foster engagement and local routing. Toyota Mobility Foundation and its partners' local staff are trained to maintain electric tricycles and other project assets with an emphasis on safety. Staff members also further knowledge transfer by training local beneficiaries to operate and maintain electric tricycles safely, to collect data digitally, and to monitor operations. The Toyota Mobility Foundation and its partners are sourcing and developing hardware assets such as electric tricycles, batteries, and solar charging stations, as well as underlining training materials and processes to ensure that all assets can continuously be maintained. The movement of electric tricycles is collected and monitored using GPS, and this data is shared as open data to optimize transport of goods and passengers. All operations are actively monitored and managed with applications, allowing for optimal execution and continuous improvement. The goal is to take advantage of mobility to stimulate economic activity. For example, economic activity such as the aggregation and transportation of dairy products or bananas. The expansion of such activities will increase the income of the supported farmers and boost the GDP of the community. The Toyota Mobility Foundation has launched and supported 3 projects so far, which we will introduce to you next. In Zimbabwe, since 2019, Support for Mobility for Africa. In Kenya, since 2020, Kisi Smart Community. In Uganda and Kenya, Power Africa, an electric multifunctional agri-system. The Toyota Mobility Foundation, enabling more people to go more places.
We will now watch the videos of the 3 initiatives that Toyota Mobility Foundation has supported.
Like in much of sub-Saharan Africa, 70% of Zimbabweans derive their livelihood from agriculture. The agricultural sector in rural Zimbabwe is dominated by women, but farming is not their only task.
Indinonzi Susan Ruth Chapanduka ndiri mugari wemuhwedza ndine vana 3 ndinogara nemurume wangu nevana vangu. Musati mani mahamba muno vanhu vazhinji vaitongofamba netsoka nekuti kukwira motikari zvaidhura, plus mota dzaiva dzitori shoma matranspota.
Suzanne spends most of her time and money on transport to attend to her many responsibilities. Much of the time is spent walking, since there are few other transport options available and fuel is costly. These challenges impact not only livelihoods, but also children's access to education and health.
Women spending hours every day carrying heavy loads, it impacts on their physical well-being, it has huge social consequences. Women don't get to hospitals or clinics in time to deliver, so they might die. Kids don't get vaccinated. Crops rot in the field because they can't get to the local market. So the social and economic consequences are huge.
I'm Tandy. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. I work with the research team on baseline surveys and data collection. Okay, so we are providing EV transport that is cheaper to rural communities, especially women. So we train these ladies for 5 days and then they get a certificate to prove that they have qualified to drive a Humber.
Through its support to Shantha, Toyota Mobility Foundation learned of the nexus between mobility and agriculture in Africa, and that the deployment of light EVs such as the Humber can serve as a potent tool to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. TMF has been working closely with MFA to incorporate Kaizen, safety measures in the assembly, maintenance of the vehicles, and to develop digital fleet management solutions and models with the right market fit. This is Western Kenya, Kisi. It's mostly a rural community of 1.2 million residents. Most families here are farmers, and most farms are less than 4 acres. But for many, transport is challenging. Even where there is access to roads, the roads are poor. And where there is access to motorized transport, it is often inadequate. Smallholder farmers in this region still struggle to sell their agri-products at a good price before they spoil.
Jina ni Rose Eni Nyamos, Geta, Kisi, West Kenya. Maziwa tulikuwa tunakamua, ama nilikuwa ninakamua na kupepa asubuhi na mapema saa 11. Unatembeza njiani, unafikisha kwa mahoteli. Pengine unakosa makastoma, unarudi na maziwa.
Kwa na shida ya kutembea na maziwa mbali. Kwa samba sina samba kubwa sana. Niko na kidogo, nimepanda mahindi kidogo na kachai kidogo tu. Lakini sana sana ni ng'ombe tu ndio inanisaidia.
TMF realized that even when farmers working small tracts of land are productive, they face the challenges due to poor transportation and logistical infrastructure, first mile and last mile challenges. But through more reliable and available mobility, rural farmers can be assured that their hard work will pay off rather than letting their milk go to spoil. By leveraging technology, TMF is trying to give smallholder farmers access to tools and resilience to overcome poverty and deal with climate risks to their livelihoods. Since over 60% of Africans derive their livelihood from farming, lessons learned in places like Kisi are relevant to many communities across the region and continent. TMF launched the Kisi Smart Community to support rural mobility. We have developed a rural mobility platform that can be scaled, replicated, and modified by other public, private, and civil society players across the world. The platform consists of local operations, electric mobility, and logistics supported by a local organization and technology.
My name is Julia Omariba. I'm a KSA employee. I am a dairy aggregator and I am the team leader as well. We have provided them with guaranteed market for their products. Unlike before when they used to walk around trying to find a market for their milk, for example, now they are guaranteed of us giving them market for the milk. So they don't have to worry about where to sell the milk or who to sell the milk to.
TMF realizes that the challenge of addressing rural African poverty requires a synergy of multiple approaches beyond simply mobility. TMF has partnered with Ogembo Dairy, a local dairy enterprise, and Aceleron, a refurbishable battery technology startup. We invite others to bring our learnings to their communities as well. In this way, Kisi Smart Community aims to further rural economic development and rural quality of life. There is a famous African proverb, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Kisi Smart Community is always looking to learn and work with allies. Please reach out to us if you want to go far. The Toyota Motor Corporation, with help from the Toyota Mobility Foundation, has spent years developing the Power Africa Initiative. The objective of the Power Africa Initiative is to develop a multifunctional farm machine for African smallholder farmers.
I start weeding my crops from morning up to noon time. I use my local hoe, using my hand.
I get very tired. Kita me machine rama konya kere achala na pur kere jame tila ngere. Ma chiel rama me yado pur dong koraduong. Ini na chiel ka ya idiko na hai di chenga ma worni ni apur kana duong peda pur atitidi. E kadang miyo dong anuo dong chiema duong. Ameno kena dang dong nuo dong magoda dong apa chama chama magoda chato.
Nhiều điều giảm bé khá mà nó nuôi cho là bạn là phụ anh pura bé cỏ bé bé mà nó chả bạn đi quên chơi mà bạn có pura quên chơi mà bé 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 rồi quên đi quên là nó nọ.
Earlier prototypes utilized internal combustion engines, but now current testing is being carried out comparing internal combustion engines with battery-powered machines. For battery-powered machines would allow rural communities to take advantage of decentralized renewable energy instead of costly and sometimes inaccessible gasoline. Additionally, the Power Africa prototypes will be assembled locally with locally available parts and evaluated on their potential to reduce the drudgery faced by rural smallholder farmers. Securing the assistance of an African partner with expertise in battery assembly has been critical to Power Africa's goals. That partner was Borderwork. Borderwork, which is based in Uganda, provided their trained staff and well-equipped facility to build the prototype battery, as well as the energy and mobility engineering and testing expertise. With the help of Borderwork, Power Africa has developed a battery with reduced power specifications to make it more suitable for use by smallholder farmers and can be used with multiple agricultural appliances. The prototyping and user feedback will continue throughout 2022. For Toyota Mobility Foundation and Toyota Motor Corporation believe that through iterative testing and evaluation, appropriate innovation can address the challenges faced by rural African farmers.
I believe you all enjoyed the videos that were playing. For me, it's very personal because I grew up in rural Kenya, and all these interventions that are coming up for me is very personal, and I think they will go a long way in liberating the people in the rural areas, especially the small-scale farmers. So I'm joined here with a great panel. We have two online, and we have 5 of us here. So we will start with introductions. My name is Beatrice Muthoni. I'll be your moderator for the day. I am a business development manager with Infraco Africa, a company that invests in infrastructure projects, and e-mobility is part of the sector that we invest in. And as I said earlier, for me, e-mobility in the rural areas is critical for rural development. We will have a pop-up on your screens. Kindly choose the several topics that you would want the panelists to cover this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. And then there's a Q&A, there's a chat session where you can post your questions, and we will see them and we will answer them at the end of the panel. So we will start our introductions. We will start with Bicham, who is online, and then go to Vivian, who's also online, and then we will come to the panelists who are here with me. Over to you, Bicham.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. Good day, everybody. I am Hitoshi Bizen. People often call me B-chan, so if you can send me any questions, please refer to me as B-chan. I'm a member of Toyota Mobility Foundation, so-called TMF. And I'm enjoying working together with the team here to strive to improve the quality of life throughout mobility and other measures in rural Africa. Unfortunately, I have to join today remote from Tokyo, but I'm very much looking forward to the discussion today. And taking this opportunity, I'd like to, on behalf of TMF and the team here, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the Japanese government, especially Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for giving us this opportunity to hold this event today as a part of the official side event of TCAD 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bichan. Over to you, Vivian.
Good morning, good afternoon, folks. My name is Vivian Venderino. I am founder CEO of RB Sol, a project development, research and development and finance company based out of Portugal, focusing on electrification in rural areas via mini-grids. We operate in Kenya as Kudura Power East Africa, and I'm also current president of the African Mini-Grid Developers Association, AMDA. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Vivian. We will now go to our panelists who are here with me. I will start with my right. Over to you, Jacob.
Yes, hi, my name is Jacob. I'm one of the founders and the current CEO of Bodawerk. And at Bodawerk, we are primarily a battery company, but we also provide an ecosystem of battery-powered applications in the energy, agriculture, and mobility sector.
Good morning, Shanta Bloom. I'm the founder and director of Mobility for Africa. We're working in rural Zimbabwe, but with them plans to expand to other parts of the continent. Our mission is to solve the last mile rural mobility challenge crisis using green energy and a shared fleet management system.
Thank you, Shanta.
Hi, my name is Arun. I'm from Acceleron. I run the strategy and business development for Acceleron for India and Africa. Both the countries show a lot of promise in terms of the transition from ICE to electric. Look forward to the discussions today. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Joe Mumbai, country manager of Acceleron Energy. Acceleron is a battery technology company, and we design and manufacture batteries locally. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. These are experts in the various capacities, and we are very lucky to have them in our panel today. So how we'll flow the panel is we'll start with what are the opportunities and challenges that we see in this sector, in general rural development, and but more specifically in the e-mobility sector as a sustainable way to develop the rural areas. And then we will move on with how we see, because as the solution, as somebody has already posted a question, we have multiple challenges in the rural sector. So who are the partners? What is the ecosystem that we need to solve these? And what are the partnerships that we need to forge for this great mission? And then we will finally conclude with what does the future look like, because definitely the future is bright, especially for sub-Saharan Africa. The future is definitely very bright. So to start us off, I will go with Bichan, and we will discuss on why is e-mobility or mobility generally critical for the Africa rural development. Bichan will start us off, and then Shampa will follow with her comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Beatrice. So I'd like to start off or kick off the discussion talking about why mobility is so critical. Generally, people in any parts of the world, we need access to get to services and to make our lives and improve the quality of life. This is in general terms. And these services will include food, medical, education, and other essential factors through our living. To get these kind of access, we need transportation. This transportation will be of goods and also for the people itself, mobility. In developed countries like we live in, like in Tokyo that I live in now, public transportation may be taken for granted. But as you saw in the video, people living in rural Africa, getting access to places and services is very, very hard. So no transportation like buses or taxis, so they have to walk on very severe and bad terrain. So all in all, mobility, I think, is not just about moving around, but it means food, medical, education, and actually the very, very essentials to live. So I think this is the most critical points for Africa, and that's the way mobility will play its role. Thank you.
I think just to add on what Bichan said, I entered this space from having spent nearly 30 years working in development. And I set up Mobility for Africa because I was frustrated that this problem, no one was doing anything about it. I think a lot of people know that the social and economic consequences are enormous, but we haven't quite seen the commitment. And I think the limitations of petrol and ICE had meant that, it's expensive, it's often not available in rural areas. So the opportunity we have now with e-mobility, with the huge investment in renewable energy, new technology, gives us an exciting chance to solve this problem that has such fundamental, it underpins all of the SDGs, it underpins economic, social development. And especially for women, I feel that it's unacceptable that we can send men to the moon, but we can't address the fact that rural women still walk miles every day to collect, water or to walk with their kids to a health clinic. And just to say, I think what we also need to remember is that people think rural Africa is too poor. I think for those of us that have spent time in rural parts of the continent, they're very dynamic. People are busy. They are finding ways. They are some of the best entrepreneurs that I've ever met are in rural areas. And when we look at what on average is spent on transport, it's 20 to 30% of incomes. But people always just assume that the business model won't work. But the irony is when you look at the aggregate demand for transport, it can sustain itself and the demand is there.
Wow, thanks Shanta. Shanta is very passionate about the rural woman and we can see that in her passion. So maybe moving to our next question. We have challenges basically. Developing infrastructure projects in the rural areas is definitely very challenging. And we have seen those challenges in terms of technology, policy, regulation, roads. It's a whole set of challenges. So Bicham, maybe to start with you, what do you think are the key challenges for the rural Africa's development and how can we cope with that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Beatrice. As Beatrice mentioned, the key challenge is to create a variety of infrastructural services, I think. Other than the issue of mobility that myself and Shanta mentioned just a few minutes ago, lifeline like electricity or water or food or communication, medical care, education, business, they are all very, very much necessary too. But the key is, and the one important thing that I think is that we just cannot give them these services to the people who are in need. It is important for us to support the people in need by conveying our technology and expertise and maybe our know-hows, so that at the end of the day, they can create the necessary items or service by themselves to be self-reliable, if I may say. In this way, not just like giving them away the solution like this, but in this way, I think we can support them in a more sustainable way. So transfer of technology and know-hows in a very long term will be a very key point in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bicham. And you mentioned a great word, sustainable. I think overall, we want to create an ecosystem that is very sustainable. And Vivian, maybe over to you on the challenges. And I know you have a lot of experience in rural Kenya specifically. And yeah, over to you. What do you think are the challenges and how can we cope with them? Sorry, Vivian, you might be on mute.
Thank you for that, Beatrice. We've been working in Western Kenya for over 10 years, in Busia County specifically. And I remember when we first went there, we were looking at communities that are predominantly thatched roof houses, little or no economy whatsoever, and came to the realization that the people, were effectively the base of the pyramid, the poorest of the poor, pay 3-4 times more for equivalent services and products than anybody else. In urban areas, and whether that's in direct cash contribution or the net effect of the opportunity cost of using those services, such as, for instance, water that is not potable, is immense. And Bichan mentioned the critical thing here, which is lack of infrastructure, and that lack of infrastructure ultimately results in an environment where people are more willing to leave. They often go to peri-urban areas, not necessarily a better quality of life. And they're faced with the same kind of challenges of trying to eke out a living. And I really believe that the implementation of effective, sustainable infrastructure, whether water, electricity, mobility, education, healthcare, is something that can fundamentally change the quality of life in the rural context and result in situations where people don't feel like they need to leave where they've been born, and can actually make a life that ultimately improves their livelihoods for themselves and for their family.
Thank you, Vivian. Shanta, you have worked with rural women in Zimbabwe and you have seen these challenges firsthand.
Yeah, I think Vivian summed it up very well. I think, you know, we have a growing continent, the population. This is the fastest growing place in the world. We're projecting, you know, 1 in 4 children will be African by later this century. So we have this great demographic dividend, but how do we make use of that? And I am convinced that we have to make rural more viable, and we have to address the local economy. Agriculture is a huge factor in every country. It's food security, it's livelihood, it's the opportunity for economic development. And yet we have been under-resourcing it and not taking it seriously. And we can't cope with everyone packing up their bags and moving to cities. I mean, we see that the cities don't have adequate jobs and infrastructure. So I think we have to be a bit more urgent about the need to be more creative and innovative in rural. I think one of the big challenges is that it's not that there hasn't been 20 or 30 years of rural development, but we haven't been honest perhaps enough about what's worked and what hasn't, and where we always want a ready solution. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for Toronto Mobility Foundation is they've been willing to experiment, take a chance, let's give it a go. We don't know the answers. The business model isn't perfect when you haven't tested anything. So we need that space in rural parts of the continent to experiment and learn. Intuitively, we know that people are smart and capable. We know that they are hard workers. So intuitively, they need to be worth the investment.
Thank you, Shanta. We can see the passion. And Jacob, over to you, Jacob. You have worked with people in the rural, I think, Uganda, if I believe so, from the video that we watched. What are the challenges that you have seen and how can we cope with this challenge?
Yes, thank you very much, Beatrice. So what we believe is that one very important challenge to address is the localization of value chains. And a value chain actually starts with R&D and finding the right product market fit. And that's the reason why we're in Uganda and we're on the ground, because that allows us to build something and test it on the road in front of our office and see what works and what doesn't work, and take it back into the workshop and you know, try to get a functioning product at the end of the day. One example that probably everybody knows for local engineering for the local market is PayGo, right? Pay as you go. It's a technology that was developed in order to address a specific East African sub-Saharan financing challenge, and it starts with R&D, the value chain, but if we take it further, we also want a technology that is locally maintainable, right? That's the step one of circular economy, is reuse and maintain and extend the lifespan. So that requires capacity building, and then towards the end of life, building that local entire value chain. At some point, the product will be retired, and would also like to recycle those products. So it's literally it's about localizing the entire value chain from I think it's called from cradle to grave, right? So starts with R&D, continues with assembly or manufacturing, with reuse and maintenance, and it ends with recycling. And I think this is very key for any of the challenges that we're discussing today.
Right. Wow. Thanks, Jacob. So research and development, local engineering, we have to create models that are sustainable on the ground, because rural Africa is not accessible to everybody. So we have to create an ecosystem within the rural areas that can sustain itself. That's beautiful. Awesome, Jacob. So maybe as we speak of Africa, Bicham, I'm coming back to you. In the context of Africa, what challenges and opportunities distinguish between electric mobility from urban deployments? So we've seen a lot of these electric mobility startups in the urban areas, and those are moving on. And then we have the rural development. In your opinion, what are the challenges and opportunities that distinguish this?
Yes, Beatrice, thank you very much. Obviously, when we create this kind of e-mobility service, we need to work on two sides, I think. One side is for the user perspective. Once the user wants to use this service, user must be able to use the mobility service whenever one wants to use it. So if the user wants to get some medical care and he needs a lift, he has to have that quick. Convenience may be the key word. Users cannot wait for a long time. The other side is from the operation side. In order to achieve what I mentioned now about the quick service, we need to be able to manage the fleet of e-mobility very effectively, so we can dispatch the necessary mobility to effectively to the user in needs. This also includes the battery management. We're talking about e-mobility. We're talking about the battery and motor operated tools. So we need to change the batteries at the most effective time so that the mobility service can be available when it is in need. So to do so, we need to be able to effectively gather and manage the user and vehicle and battery data all in all. And only if we are successful here, the number of usage of this service can have a good chance to grow, and we'll be able to enjoy the scale merit, which is crucial to providing affordable service. Now, I think this is very, very crucial, not only in the developed countries, but in the rural areas where these kind of e-mobility service is in a very basic or the prior stages. So we are doing our best today now with our team to make this successful as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Bichan, and your efforts is clearly visible on the ground. Moving over to you, Jacob. I know you have worked both in the urban development and you've worked in the rural development. How do you see this as intertwining?
In our experience, the major difference is sort of the level of economic activities. So an urban area is densely populated, has typically electricity access in many cases. And if we look at the example of e-mobility, the volume of the transportation volume in an urban area is already high enough to implement some, for example, electric motorcycles. And we're seeing that happening in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda by different companies. And that volume is high enough to sort of have a model in which the asset is being repaid. If we're now going to a rural area, the problem is that there's not even enough transportation volume in a day to repay an electric motorcycle on a loan, for example. So our challenge is we need to sort of get the asset utilization rate up so we can, provide assets on a loan and repay them. And in order to do that, we need to sort of create synergies. And that's very possible because other than in the urban area, the rural area often lacks electricity access. So we have more than one problem to solve. And we also want to use assets for more than one problem so we get the utilization rate up. So what we believe is that other than urban areas, rural areas even more require business model innovation, requires addressing multiple problems at the same time with those assets. And this, of course, is more complex, it's more difficult, but it also provides the chance of, unlocking those synergies. So rural is harder. There are also more problems to solve, but that means the opportunity is also very large to solve all those problems in a combined and a holistic approach.
That is very true, Jacob. And over to you, Shanta. I know you have strong opinions.
No, just because obviously I started in the rural and I've watched and I'm very excited about the new momentum in urban, but it should not be either or. And I think, yes, the challenge of energy in rural is much different. Electrification is a different problem. But what we've been doing is we're talking about shared mobility solutions. And this is what people underestimate. I mean, we have women working together in a group that rent every month. And I can tell you one of our groups, for example, last month they harvested 2 tons of onions because they could get back and forth between their field, which was 3 kilometres from their home, and carry manure and bring it back. And then they could get they found a school that needed those onions and potatoes for boarding. So basically, it's not thinking about ownership. And the thing about the transport taxi system in urban is it is there. We know the boda bodas work, but the other thing I have to remind everyone is we don't have boda bodas all over the continent. In Southern Africa, we have pretty much no taxis. We have second-hand four-wheel cars. So we have a real deficit. The other exciting thing is we've been experimenting is going back to what Kisi is doing with aggregate. We have a lot of very productive farmers that are contract farmers that are selling their dairy on contract to a processor already. So for us, it's just making the synergy between the agricultural producers who want the small-scale farming produce, but often have a huge logistical challenge in getting it there. And that makes some of our farmers very bankable because they're actually selling already to an existing market. And I think if we, what happens, I think, in development is everyone's very siloed. Do you know what I mean? And this is where the integration is needed. You know, we need the renewable energy players. We need the energy there before we can set up the battery swapping charging. We need the technology and ecosystem around batteries. But we've also got a huge amount of investment already going into agriculture. But we need to bring those together.
Thank you, Shanta. I think what is coming out very clearly is that we need an ecosystem of partners to work on these challenges and opportunities so that, because the challenges are many and not one solution fits all. So we have different border works solving a different problem. We have Acceleron solving a different problem. We have Mobility for Africa. You know, I'm happy that Vivian is here. Vivian is predominantly doing mini-grids in rural Africa. How can we interconnect those mini-grids to electric mobility service platforms? So over to you again, Bicham. Why do we need an ecosystem of interventions, and what are the necessary components of this ecosystem really?
Thank you, Beatrice. In order to answer to your question, I'd like to very, very briefly touch upon what we are experiencing in our project in Kisi. We are trying to help out many small-scale farmers to expand their business and to increase their revenue, to improve their quality of life. Now, farmers, especially for those who have been farming just for their own supply and wish to expand for more business-basis farming, first of all, they need to get access to the market. What I mean is that they need to know which kind of markets are looking for their yields and what kind of demand is there out there in the market. And also, as one of the ecosystems, the very important component will be financial support. When such farmers need to expand to meet the demand, or they need to change their farming methods, financial support will be very, very much necessary to change their farming methods or to acquire more capex like e-mobility and other tractors or other agricultural tools. Also, as I mentioned before, data collection to coordinate these kind of mobility tools and apparatus will be also very necessary. And so maintenance of the fleets and the charging facilities will also be necessary. There are many components that I think we should be taking care of, but the ones that I just explained are only one of the components I think that we need to give attention to. Thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you, Bicham. And now I will turn over to Shanta. I know Shanta has worked with quite a number of partners to date. So what partnerships do we need? What is the ecosystem that we need to build this rural development?
Well, we've been in Zim, we were very lucky to start with academic partnerships. So we worked with the University of Zimbabwe. We had students from an innovation hub in Midland State. We brought students from China that were helped us with the mapping on that side. So we had an academic, base. Then we've also really tried to reach out to the agricultural sector. And here it's both the public and the private partnership. It's the for example, we're moving into dairy, and we have the dairy processors, and then we also have the NGO development financed partners who give technical input and help with buying better cows or helping with produce. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to sort of see where we fit in. And what we've been working in, we worked in egg production too, is our little mandate is clear. We're solving the mobility problem that links it to the market or to the field or to the harvest. And we're hoping that the others can do the technical agricultural bit, the market aggregation. And we think that there are lots of partners within this space. On the technology and the policy front, we've been working closely with the government because, I mean, many African countries do not have policies. This is a new thing. We don't have the regulatory frameworks. We need a lot of work together, and I keep on talking to my government counterparts and saying we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have 54, 55 countries. We can actually share and set continental standards, but we do need to share experience and help government grapple with this new sector. And then across the private sector, there's the batteries, there's a battery recycling, there's making sure we have certified technicians, and we make this a professionalised course, you know, that we have a new generation of car mechanics that can fix a Toyota, now learning how to manage an e-mobility car or vehicle. So it's exciting. The potential of green jobs is huge. We know that from renewable energy. So, I mean, the potential to create employment for this younger demographic that's hungry for skills and new opportunities is there. And I think it's just been very practical in our approach and not reinventing the wheel, but leveraging from India and China and other parts of the world and Japan, and taking technology and modifying it and adapting it to the local context.
Wow, thank you, Shanta. I'll move on to you, Vivian. And maybe specifically in terms of financing as well, of rural development and infrastructure, how do we see the ecosystem evolving?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that 10 years, 11 years ago, when I first got interested in rural development, that really the landscape was NGOs. There were NGOs addressing all aspects of rural development. And now, 10 years later, you find a host of startups from founders from all over the world that are addressing these individual challenges. So Shanthe is passionate about e-mobility, and Jacob is passionate about, I guess, technology and its application in the local context and creating the jobs. And I kind of twigged on to electricity as an enabler. We're doing work in water as well. But it's complicated as a startup because, one, investors consider this sector risky, right? Because they're expecting commercial returns, but at the end of the day, we're all of us on a long kind of trajectory to demonstrate commercial returns and sustainability, and very few of us are there yet. I think one of the sectors where that has started to happen is solar home systems, which started out 5-6 years ago as solar portable lighting, which was effectively a flashlight with a solar panel, right? And we're all addressing different aspects, and the key thing is to have is a common vision for what does an appropriate livelihood in the rural context look like, and addressing all of these issues: education, healthcare, economy, mobility, access to basic services like electricity and water, and then coming together in partnerships that are aligned with that vision so you can address those things. I met Shantha, I don't know, nearly 4 years ago in Dubai. We were both funded by Expo 2020, small grant funding for testing some ideas. And already at that time, we started talking about the potential to tie access to rural electrification mini-grids in a county like Busia, where we have 14 plants spread across 50, 60, 70 kilometers between them, which would help immeasurably to allow those electric vehicles to get more scale, right? You don't have to go from point A to do your work at point B and then come back to point A to charge. You can charge at point B. And that means you can then move on to point C, and that ultimately means that as someone who's delivering agriculture or husbandry type of products and services, that you expand your range. And that ultimately means that you can potentially get access to better prices in areas where your service is potentially less prevalent. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Vivian, for that. And now I'm turning my cursor to the technology providers here, because technology, we're in 2022, and technology has to play a role in whatever kind of development that we choose to. And I know Acceleron and Borderworks are in the middle of that, and they have embraced technology and are rolling it out to the rural areas. And I want to turn to Joseph and ask what technologies are needed to address these challenges that you have had, and what are you doing towards that?
Yeah, I think the key word here, Beatrice, is right technology, and right technology comes with sustainability. Jacob mentioned about the need for research and development. So as an organization, we have been part of several R&D activities with partners in the space, and this sustainability aspect and the full circularity when we design our products. So what is needed in the market is the serviceability, maintainability, ability of these products. And as an organization, we have really made some good strides into that, and we are actually supporting our technology, our partners, to be able to offer these solutions in the rural Africa. These four aspects are actually the very features on which our company was founded, and we continue to partner with organizations like TMF, Kisi Smart Communities, to be able to improve the lives of these rural communities through this sustainable technology. Yeah, thanks.
All right, now moving over to Jacob. What are these technologies that you need to sustain this development in the rural areas?
Yeah, I think to add to what was just said, we believe that local technology development is required to, one, address the commercial viability of product, right? We talked about asset utilization today, and how can we utilize an asset, maximize asset utilization, for example, shareability. A battery is not shareable from day one just like that, right? It needs to be engineered to be shareable. A battery is not naturally a circular product. It needs to be engineered to be circular, so we can squeeze out every little drop of value out of those cells from cradle to grave, as I said before. So, a battery is not necessarily hot swappable with a mini grid, but if we can achieve that, if you can engineer that, we have a whole new level of shareability, and with that engineering, we get the asset utilization high. We have a higher, a product that is, commercially more viable, and that will help us to accelerate the transition. We also talked about, I think you mentioned, product market fit. What is the right product? And we believe that one very important aspect is that any product that we are developing is meant to improve the standard of living, right? The quality of life. Everyone wants more income, right? It's as simple as that. So if we deliver a product that can deliver more income, it will be used 24/7, right? So we need high quality and industrial products for productive use, right? Industrial is productive use, and it looks tiny, a motorcycle, but we need an industrial motorcycle. We need an industrial battery, and so that's the product market fit and the maintainability throughout the lifetime of the product. And then we have other challenges like pay-as-you-go financing. So even that requires technology development and piloting and testing what works, what doesn't work, to remove that barrier of the high upfront cost of any industrial product, which is naturally expensive on day one, but lasts long. And last but not least, which is also technology related, but not so much R&D, training and skilling. In order to maintain the product, in order to reuse, recycle a product, we don't want to send our waste across the globe for that to happen elsewhere. We want it to happen here. So I think tightly connected with the technology is also the training and skilling aspect. You know, how does the technology work? How do we maintain that technology? How should the technology be designed so it can be maintained locally? So those are, I think, some aspects in regards to technology that are very important, we believe.
So maybe just to put you on the spot, Jacob, in terms, you've mentioned a lot of research and development, product fits, and knowing that you have a lot of early startups in this space, how do you finance this? Or because I know one of the challenges that we keep hearing is we have a problem with financing this R&D because not all investors will come in at the beginning and finance your R&D. You need some to work around it. So how are you working around that?
Honestly, we had a little bit of our own starting capital as private individuals, and we believe in this mission, in this future, and because nobody else is doing it, we have to put our own money on the table and, you know, see where it gets us. And I have no real other advice to that because because it's I think everybody in the space know how hard it is to get financing, and the R&D stage is so far away from a business that delivers commercial returns, what the investor wants, right? So that if you say, okay, my project starts actually from the R&D stage, you know, then you have risk times 10, and even the standard risk is already almost unacceptable for most. And now you say, hey, I start with R&D, and I don't want it.
I hear you, Jacob. And I'm going over to you, Bicham. What technologies, and then maybe we'll come over to Vivian after that, are needed to address these challenges? And what, as TMF, I know you have done a lot, what are you seeing in that space? Over to you. Okay,
talking from a very non-technological point of view.
Sorry, Bicham, you seem to be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. From TMF side, all the issues that we discussed, I think all of it would not work without the coordination of the data itself. But I think the issue here is that is how to coordinate this data and provide it equally and share it with the users themselves. I myself, the IT literacy myself is very, very low. And I see the smartphone very, very easy to use. I got one private iPhone here, and a company has also lent me one. It's very easy to use, but I sometimes feel like switching off my company phone for many, many reasons. But anyway, in Africa, only 10 or 15%, I heard, only have access to these kind of very, very useful smartphones. Therefore, how do we provide our data or our coordinated service to them? So I think we should be relying more on simple technology like unstructured supplementary service data, which is some kind of a similar to the more short message service or something. So we do the hard part behind the scenes to coordinate and create all the data, but to provide those to the users, I think we must make it as simple as possible so that the end users can appreciate it at very easily. This is one point that I think is very important from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Bicham, for that. And finally, I'll go to you, Vivian. I know the solar space has evolved with time, and there's a lot of new technology coming up, even but in terms of batteries. What would be your take on this?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in our space, we're essentially building decentralized infrastructure. And so when you're reliant on an asset to deliver a service and the customer's use of that service is kind of critical to your business model, and then Jacob mentioned earlier on the concept of asset utilization, something that's very, very prevalent in our work as well. Then it's critical that you focus on quality, that you don't try to reinvent the wheel, and ultimately looking to technologies that give you a significant downward cost curve. So in Kenya, when we expanded first phase of expansion, we added 2,000 customers. it cost us roughly $900 per customer to provide that infrastructure. As we go into this next phase of expansion, we're looking to build, to add another 5,500 customers to our portfolio in Kenya also. And, we're now looking at costs around $700 to $750. But COVID happened, and in the last year, there's suddenly a shortage of, anything that's related to electrical components. And so while we'd originally budgeted at 750, I'm expecting that we will see a 10 to 12% increase because suddenly the solar market around the world is picking up, and panels are costing more and batteries are costing even more. And I think what's really interesting is this concept that Jacob mentioned around the circular economy. Batteries for us represent 40% of that connection cost. And we know that those batteries, if you're using lead acid, they have a 5 to 6 year life cycle. If you're using lithium, you can get maybe 10 years out of them. And then, of course, you can deploy smaller systems because of their depth of discharge and, in principle, lighter products. So that technology curve is not something that we're driving, but we're staying on top of it to be able to use products like Acceleron's products. And some of the newer solar panels, you can buy solar panels now. They're up at 550 watts for, the same, essentially 2 square meters of panels. And so our job is to ensure that we build products, assets that are reliable based on the best possible quality at the best possible price. And where we do invest in R&D is in 2 areas. One is, as Bicham mentioned, USSD-based services for doing surveys, baseline surveys, impact-related surveys, for providing, for making payments via mobile money, and then also confirming to the customer, their balances and that kind of thing. And then the second area is in the area of metering development, where traditionally we've used smart meters that are standard market products that KPLC uses in country as well. But they have limited functionality from the point of view of what we need. And the reason that is because we're dealing with different types of consumers. So urban consumers, yourself, when you buy electricity, you buy it, you use it, and you don't really care until you need to recharge it. But what we find in the rural context is that customers want to know what their balance is. And they want to know how much they're consuming. And when they buy a new fridge, they expect there to be a huge impact on their consumption. And so they want to know what that impact is. Of course, they don't understand kilowatt hours. All they understand is shillings. And so we put a lot of effort and work into building systems and structures, IT related, that allow the customers to understand that better and to be able to interact with electricity in a way that makes more sense to them and their livelihoods.
Oh, thank you very much, Vivian, for that expounded explanation. Now that we have seen the opportunities and challenges, we have seen how partnerships could work, how the ecosystems to work. I will go on to the future now. What does the future look like? What are the roadmaps? All of us want electric mobility to work in the rural areas. So what are the critical milestones that we need to meet? And I'll start with you, Bicham, on the critical milestones and for what do we need to unlock so that we can see electric mobility's full potential in the rural areas? Over to you, Bicham.
Thank you, Beatrice. Yeah, thank you very much. As for the roadmaps and critical milestones, I think the users to get used to these new technology is very, very important in the first place. So we just cannot introduce new technologies all at once because the end users will not be able to understand and be able to fully utilize and appreciate them from stage 1. So I think we should go step by step and with our roadmaps. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we must support the people in need by conveying our technology and the expertise and know-hows. And this will also obviously take quite a long time. So, so this means that the roadmap is not a journey that will be accomplished just overnight, and there will be no instant results. So at TMF, we generally think that we need to spend at least about 3 years to see if our ambitions on these e-mobility solutions will work out in each site. So I believe that the key is to have a mid to long-term vision, and at the end of the day, the skills and the technology and know-hows should be, after that, should be surely transferred to the local members in a long-term period of time and to make them to make a very sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bijam. And quickly moving on to Accelerate. Arun, in your opinion, what do we need to do to unlock the future of the e-mobility space in rural development?
Well, I speak for and behalf of the battery community. And especially in the area of lithium-ion battery packs. One of the things that is very important around the lithium-ion battery pack is the chemistry, which is a difficult chemistry to manage, because if it gets too hot, it just blows away. So it's both an asset as well as a liability if not used properly. So the word BMS is currently used. The battery management system is very popularly used to manage the chemistry within the battery. So talking about the future, we see that there's a distinct possibility of the word BMS being replaced by BIS, which is called the Battery Information Systems, which not only manages the batteries, but also treats battery packs as assets, as a central repository of information, and triggers off what is called as scheduled maintenance. Like, for example, if there is a scheduled maintenance required for a battery pack, within a 1 year of its use, something as simple as a short messaging service could be triggered to a consumer saying that, hey, your battery packs are about to get due for servicing, and here is where you need to go, the nearest hub where you could get your battery packs to be serviced. And those hubs are empowered by the local community. It need not come back to the same place from where the battery packs have really been purchased. So I see empowerment of local community as a result of this. I also see a good aggregation of data-driven systems. It is very natural. The progression is very natural from a stage where we are at early stages of deployment to maturity. So that process is natural, but the word management I see being replaced with something called as information systems. That's number one. And the other aspect is also related to training and community empowerment, which I've already stated, and I'm just extending my inspiration from Shanta, who laid the importance of community empowerment. So if a technology is simple, if the future that comes out of the technology is also simple, communities could be empowered. And I believe that Acceleron is very rightly poised to empower local communities to do that. And hopefully we get to see more companies of that scale coming on. It is very hard to predict the future. Okay, so that is what Niels Bohr said. But what makes it more predictable is the mathematics of scale. So there will be an increased deployment of systems in the future, and that will enable a lot of information technologies around the battery packs, which is again going to play an important role in how we treat this ecosystem. I would say, again, future is difficult to predict, but a lot of the future definitely depends on what we are doing at the present.
Thank you very much. Maybe moving quickly over to you, Jacob. He said he's representing all the so do you agree with him, and what do you think as the
100%.
Okay.
Thank you so much for representing the battery community. Yeah. So everything you said, I'm fully aligned with that. We need not a BMS, we need a BIS. That's the reason why we did tech development. We developed our IoT battery management system, right, with the data uplink that can inform, when something should be maintained, whether there's residual value in it, so should it be reused or go for end-of-life recycling. Also, the comment you made about scale. One thing that's for sure, we'll have millions of EVs in Africa in the next 10 years, right? Yeah. Meaning we know for sure there will be millions of old, used, dead, whatever batteries, And that's again, it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity, right? If we can reallocate those batteries that have been used in an EV for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they are already fully depreciated now, and we can sort of shift them into the rural areas where every energy system, basically requires a solar panel, a battery, and an inverter, and we have electricity, then we have a chance to design our products right now in a way that the waste of e-mobility will actually never become waste, but people will be waiting for those batteries, because they will be affordable, they still have 5 years left in them. So I couldn't agree more. And I think in addition to that, one challenge that we still need to solve is sort of inherently in the term smallholder farmer. The productivity of that, we talked to farmers when we were in Kisi last week that actually have to make a living of half an acre of land. So if we talk about utilization, an individual cannot push asset utilization to the level where it needs to be commercially viable on an individual level. So to add to what we were discussing today already, I think there is that aspect of community-owned assets, right? Hubs, even the mini-grids that Vivian is building it's almost a community asset because it's shared by 2,000 people, those assets at the end of the day. And I think that will be really, really key because I think 80% of the farmers in Africa are smallholder farmers. So we need community solutions to get the asset utilization where it needs to be, at least in the beginning, before people have increased their income to a point that they can own an asset as an individual, and while that is making commercial sense. So I think those are, like, as I said, I fully agree with what you said, Arun, very well said. And in addition to that, I think there's also a community aspect. So the idea of sharing a battery between a boat, a tuk-tuk, and an energy system is a nice idea. But which smallholder farmer owns a boat, a tuk-tuk, a motorcycle, and an energy system, right? So that shareability only works at community level, I would say.
I totally agree. I totally agree to that. And just to mention that we can see your questions, and we have a lot of questions, and I'll try to wrap up as we only have 10 minutes left. So to you, Shanta, and I will incorporate one of the questions, one of the viewers asked, what do you think the future looks like? And I know you totally agree on the community. And one question that has been asked is, what is the role of agri-value addition in rural e-mobility?
Okay, so just on the future, I mean, I think the thing is we also have to look at what's going on globally. At COP last year, we had a huge momentum and target set by industry itself about conversion in transport, right? Transport globally constitutes 20 to 25% of carbon emissions. This continent only produces 4%. We are not the major blame here, but we should be leveraging the technology and the know-how to have a just climate transition. So I think that's, we don't have to wait. We have to move now because the rest of the world is moving. And I don't think we should in 10 years' time be dealing to be the dumping ground of every second-hand car, ICE, from the rest of the world. I also think globally shared mobility is accepted. So it's not like we're introducing a new concept. We've all got used to Uber. We've all got used to, we don't need to own assets anymore. So I think communities know better about shared assets because they help each other in so many ways, especially in rural areas. I just want to add, before I go to other productive value change, that when we talk about market fit, we just have to remember that in transport, generally women are not part of the market fit. It is a very male-dominated sector. People never ask women about their experience of transport. They never design technology or fit for them. When we introduced our Humber, we knew that most of our women didn't know how to ride a bike. We're terrified of learning how to ride a bike. If you're 60 and you've never ridden a bike and you have to carry a baby and something on your head, it's not the greatest transport. So, our Humber is small, it's a tricycle, it goes slowly, but the women don't need to straddle. But we spend hours talking to them. We speak to them all the time. And I just want to highlight the gender bias. There's a gender bias in the science industry. So we've got to remember that that's 50% of women need to be consulted as we build market fit. And finally, in value agriculture, I mean, yes, I mean, the thing is, I think, and many of us on this panel, e-mobility, mobile energy is what rural communities need. They need to be able to move their tools from their farm to the shared community asset site. They need, so the beauty of mobility and batteries is that you can use battery storage for a fridge on the back of the Humber, you can use, you know, it for a grinder, you can use it for a processor. So we have the potential, if we do it right, to make sure that the battery technology can fit multiple purposes and be used for battery storage, mobility, products of use tools, and then you're giving the farmer so much more. So I do think we constantly need to prove this for validation, but there's no reason we can't. We have all these farmers waiting for us to come and test new ideas. And as long as we're doing it with them, talking to them, listening to them, I'm ambitious. We need to act with a lot more urgency. Look at the global food security crisis. It's impacting this continent. We know that people can grow their own food, but we're not enabling that to happen at the moment.
Wow, thank you, Shanta. And you had Shanta, gentlemen. Women have to be included in this decision. And maybe moving over to you, Vivian. And I want you to speak from a sustainability perspective. And how do we see these as sustainable? How do we make these all these ecosystems sustainable for the rural development?
So I think, I think the critical thing here is sustainability can only really happen in an environment that has been structured around private sector investment that can ultimately take advantage of the market opportunity. And so I would say that for that to happen, you know, regulation is required. It's taken 10 years in Kenya to get to the point where I can connect my grids to the national grid, which makes absolute sense. Because as long as you have a guideline that says you need to be X kilometers from the national grid, you create an environment where people that are between the mini grid and the national grid don't get access to power. So it's taken 10 years in Kenya, which I would argue was one of the early stage kind of adopters of mini grid projects. How long is it going to take for mobility? I don't know, but Shanta spoke to it early on, but that's something that needs to happen as a matter of priority. Because I heard Arun saying, you know, lithium is a liability as well as or lithium battery is a liability as well as an asset. Well, if it becomes a liability when someone's riding around on it and it causes an issue, then that reflects a danger to the consumer, and that, you know, for ICE engines ostensibly doesn't exist. You don't hear of motorcycles blowing up, but batteries could well do. So regulation is really key. The second thing is finance, and the third is investment. And I'd like to separate those two because I think that they're different. So investment, we need more companies like TMF that's prepared to invest in early stage ideas, taking them to market. We need more companies like Infraco that is willing to take companies from initial kind of pilot to scale up more aggressively and put up the capital to do so with shared risk. And then finance, you know, I want to target really at Acceleron and battery manufacturers and PV manufacturers and so on. We're deploying assets in our world that costs, you know, $700 to connect a customer, and that asset is going to take 8 to 9 years to pay itself back based on affordability. And I bet for EV at, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 a vehicle, it's going to take you similar amounts of time to get that asset paid for, even if you multiply usability across multiple users. And so I would look to the manufacturers of some of these core technologies to maybe start to consider us not as customers but as partners. And we had an event in Nairobi a few months ago where one of the PV manufacturers says, how can we help you scale up your business faster? And the answer was very simple, that is, figure out a way that we can use your product on a lease basis for utilization. And if we talk about batteries within the context of circular economy, it makes sense, not only to separate who is the end user of the battery and the kilowatt hours they consume, but also how that product is financed, and that the manufacturers take an active role in financing that product within the context of a business model that allows for, you know, lease to use. So those three things, and all of them underpinned by, you know, really partnership and risk sharing. Because if the sector is going to rely on individual founders like myself and Shantha and Jacob and all the others that are out there to solve these problems, it's just going to take a whole lot longer. And we really don't have that much time, to tell you the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. That is very true. It will take a lot more of us to build this. And maybe lastly, we only have 4 minutes left. So lastly, I will give it to Bicham. You can talk about what the future looks like. And then there's several questions that we have seen on how the audience can get in touch with Toyota Mobility Foundation. Maybe you can touch on that.
Yes, thank you very much. Through the experience that I have had with the team working for the rural Africa, I think I see very, very good potential, and I think the future is very, very bright. As mentioned by Vivian before, in the past only NGOs were in the picture, but now we have very, very talented and very motivated startups who are our very important partners. So with this kind of team, I think our future is looking very, very bright. Now, as for the contact to TMF about any interests in joining our activity in Africa or any kind of questions, how should I do it? Should I post it somewhere, our email address or something? Beatrice, how can I do this?
We'll share with the audience the email address of Toyota Mobility Foundation. So
yeah, so I think info at Toyota info, that will be the sufficient email address that where the question can be addressed. And again, I really do appreciate all the efforts that all you guys are putting in and all the activities that we are doing in rural Africa. And I think, again, future in Africa is very, very bright for me. Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed, it is bright. And we want to thank all of you who've been part of our audience this morning, afternoon, depending on where you're logged in from. And special thanks to the panelists. I hope we all learned something from the panelists. Feel free to reach out to the panelists through the Toyota Mobility Foundation. They all have our contacts. And thank you very much and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.